Listen, let me tell you about a kid, okay? This guy was only 12 years old when a damn strong earthquake shook Kathmandu in 2015. Can you picture it? Seriously, he became an orphan. Poor little one. And since he didn't like the orphanage at all, he decided to run away. You're beginning to picture it, aren't you? But that's not all. As if his life was a Disney movie, he came across this little Bengal tiger, Mukti, who also didn't have a mom anymore. A sad image. But the boy and the little tiger decided they weren't going to be brought down that easily. Together, like the best pals from the neighborhood, they faced a multitude of difficulties and dangers, avoiding poachers and all that. For what? Well, to find a new home, of course, but most importantly, a new family. And as my grandmother always told me, family isn't measured in blood, but in love and who's there for you when things get tough. So imagine how close they became, the boy and the little tiger surviving in the wild jungle. What a duo of courage, brother. Hey, and welcome to Wild Seat. Do you remember Balmani, the boy I was talking about earlier? Turns out he's living in an orphanage in the southern Nepali forests after those super tragic earthquakes took his whole family. There are a bunch of kids hanging around in the orphanage, but Balmani, always minding his own business, prefers to be alone, watching the world through a window. And then there's this lady, Jana, an American who runs the place, always looking at him as if she's trying to decipher his thoughts. But Balmani is like a closed chest. He doesn't give much away, you know. Meanwhile, the other kids are having fun outside, laughing, playing, and stuffing themselves with candy given to them by a guy who also works at the orphanage. But Balmani doesn't seem to find the same joy as the other kids. Sad, isn't it? Even though it should also be said that the orphanage is right next to a jungle full of tigers and other wild creatures. Yeah, just as you picture it, the Nepali wildlife in all its glory, not caring about a thing, while Balmani watches everything from his window. But trust me, this is only the first part of his story. Do you want me to continue? You'll see. So that same night, the orphanage's cook, the same one giving candy to the kids, starts spying with night vision binoculars on a tigress and her cub. And no, it's not because he's a fan of nature documentaries. This guy passes the info to a poacher, a certain Sunshire, who, by the way, with all the tattoos he has, doesn't look like the kind of guy you want to meet in a dark alley. Without wasting time, he tells the cook he'll go for the tigers as soon as he can. The next day, the orphanage continues as usual, meals for all the kids, teaching them respect and all that. And in the evening, Jana and her assistant, a certain Lennon, start talking about Balmani, about how the poor kid still hasn't gotten over the fact that he lost his family in the earthquake. Suddenly, they see Balmani, who looks like a zombie, sleepwalking towards the street. They follow him, and when he falls, he wakes up abruptly. Jana, all motherly, tells him that they'll take care of him, that they're his family. But Balmani, in rebel without a cause mode, responds that he doesn't have a family, and what is this nonsense, right? The next day, Hannah starts talking in class about Lake Goza Inunda, a sacred place up in the mountains where it's said that if you bathe, you're purified of all your sins. But Balmani, still shaken by everything that's happened to him, is in the clouds and not paying attention to anything. Hannah tries to get him out of his daydream by talking about a monastery in the heights of the Himalayas, the Tiger's Nest. And there, Balmani pays attention. He tells the class the story of a guru who flew up there on a tiger. Of course, his classmates burst into laughter, but Balmani swears it's true, that his mother told him that. Later at the orphanage, while Balmani is brushing his teeth, some kids tease him about the earthquake. Balmani doesn't stay quiet and throws water at them. Take that, you ill-mannered bunch. That night, Balmani gets up silently, grabs a few things, and erases the phrase, "We are home," from the board. He leaves the orphanage, and as he's running into the darkness, he hears a gunshot, sees a group of men, including Anchai and the cook, carrying a dead tigress. Quick as lightning, Balmani takes advantage of a moment of inattention to free a little tiger they had left orphaned and caged. He asks the little tiger to come with him. Little Mukti is scared, but ends up following Balmani. Just as the men return, Balmani runs away with the little tiger in his arms. While the men chase after them, he hides behind a tree and asks the little tiger to stay calm and silent. Sanchai is angry. "We've lost a lot of money," he says. "That little one was worth a fortune." Balmani holds Mukti tighter in his arms, knowing that the little tiger is now precious to these heartless men. As the sun rises, Balmani and Mucci take refuge in an old abandoned house that seems to have been untouched for years. Mucci is restless, and Balmani, after trying to calm him down, offers him the milk he had gathered before escaping from the orphanage. Meanwhile, Mucci drinks the milk as if it was the last he'll taste in his life. Balmani tells him they have to move from there, that there are people looking for them, and they're not exactly fans wanting an autograph. On the other hand, Sunchai calls the orphanage's cook, and you can see the guy sweating bullets. It turns out the cook doesn't just make rancheros eggs, but he's also involved in very dark business and dreams of buying a motorcycle with the money he's going to earn. Later, Balmani and him part ways. Balmani heads off on his own and runs towards the forest, but after a while, Balmani realizes he's following him. Suddenly he pounces on Balmani playfully and nibbles him like he's his toy. Finally, Balmani agrees that Muti can go with him, but only if he doesn't carry him. He ties a leash to him and continues on his way. Later, at the orphanage, Lily and Gianna chat, wondering where the kids are. During the count, they realize that Balmani is missing. He jumped the fence, the kid. The whole orphanage begins to anxiously look for him. The cook, seeing the commotion, starts to suspect something. If you're enjoying the video, please hit the like button. It only takes a second and helps me out a ton. In her desperation, Lena calls the cops to report that Balmani has disappeared. Meanwhile, we take a look at Balmani, who is by a river with Muti, lying down and resting beside him. They watch the elephants that are near the river, and Balmani, doing his best, gets in a canoe to continue his journey. They arrive at a place where the river is very rough, and Balmani struggles against the current. In the end, the canoe flips, but Muti manages and stays on the canoe. At that moment, Balmani, who is already very attached to his feline friend, gives it the name Muti. Back at the orphanage, Hannah meets the cook, who asks her about Balmani's origin. Checking the boy's papers, they find out he's from Kathmandu. The cook insists they go fetch him. After a little discussion, they decide that Ida will be the one to fetch Balmani. On his end, Balmani follows a girl who, upon seeing him, gets scared and starts running. Balmani was just looking for something to eat for him and his tiger. The girl, seeing the injured tiger, offers to help. She tells him they are nomads, their home is the world, and they never stop moving. Upon arriving at their camp, the girl's mother isn't happy about Balmani's arrival at all, but the grandfather intervenes and gives them a chance to stay as they helped his granddaughter. In the distance, we see the cook getting ready for his journey to find Balmani. Meanwhile, Balmani and the girl start exploring the place. They throw themselves into a waterfall and bathe in the river. Balmani, worried about leaving Muti alone for so long, decides to go back to the camp. When he arrives, he finds Muti playing with some sheep. Balmani gives some goat milk to Muti, who starts to drink enthusiastically. The girl tells Balmani they need to move, but before that, the grandfather warns him about tigers becoming strong and dangerous as they grow up. The girl gives a keepsake to Balmani, they say goodbye with a hug, and move on. In Kathmandu, Jana and the cook arrive in the city amidst delightful chaos. The cook, taking advantage of the trip, sends some messages to his boss while Jana takes a nap. Meanwhile, we see Balmani walking when suddenly a motorcyclist crosses his path. Balmani asks him to take him and Muti to Kathmandu in his sidecar. The motorcyclist, very friendly, agrees and they continue their journey. Upon arriving in Kathmandu, the motorcyclist bids them farewell, and Balmani thanks him. They start walking through the city streets, seeing the marks left by the earthquakes. They reach Balmani's home where, choked up, he calls for his mother while picking up what remains from the earthquake. Jana and the cook split up. He receives a call on his cell phone but says it's nothing important. Meanwhile, the villain receives a message saying he's being sought in Kathmandu. Back in Kathmandu, Balmani and Muti hear the noise of a jeep. A group of men led by the villain Sanchai arrives. They take Muti, and Balmani cries out, asking them not to take it. Balmani is left alone and sad in the house. Suddenly, Jana appears and offers him food, worried about seeing Balmani. Balmani tells her what happened to Muti. Hannah is stunned, as if she can't believe it. She tells Balmani that even if his mother is no longer there, she still lives in his heart, and they can laugh and cry together as before. Balmani asks her how she can do that if she doesn't see her, but Hannah assures him that even if she doesn't see her, his mother is with him. Hannah confesses to Balmani that she too was alone at the same age as him when her parents died in a car accident. She understands what Balmani feels and wants to help him. Meanwhile, the cook receives his payment from the villain Sanchai. At dawn, Balmani, worried about the little tiger, decides to go look for it. Balmani keeps walking, calling out to see if anyone is nearby. He arrives at a sort of sanctuary where he meets his village friends who greet him joyfully. After talking for a while, they wonder how he got there. Hannah wakes up all frightened and goes looking for Balmani. When night falls, Balmani and his comrades are lounging, discussing the theft of the tiger. A buddy spotted a farm in the area and assumed the role of Sherlock with his contacts. They ventured into the forgotten warehouses and, surprise, a reptile crosses Balmani's path and one of the thugs appears. But the kids had become smoke, you understand. And in one of them, Balmani finds this guy from Shanghai vegetating in front of the TV. He enters the room where the tiger is locked up, and the little creature, upon seeing Balmani, gives a scream, as if it had seen the Justin Bieber of tigers, basically revealing it. Balmani understood that the boss was involved in the case, but he makes a scene with one, and everyone realizes that the situation is getting serious, pursuing them everywhere and catching one. But the tiger had already taken in all this with the daylight. Balmani is with his tiger and stumbles upon a kid who is hallucinating upon seeing the tiger and offers him something from Murphy. Balmani tells him he is going to the tiger's den in the Himalayas, and the boy tells him they will also join this mission. On the other hand, the director of the orphanage hits Jana, threatening her. She will lose the license and the orphanage if she doesn't find the lost kid. Hannah starts examining a map and suspects that Balmani could have gone to the tiger's den. Hannah and the boss are talking. He acts as if nothing happened when his cell phone falls. Jana picks it up and discovers that the boss worked with Shanghai and knows where the man and the tiger were. Balmani and his new friend set off in a van towards the Himalayas. Upon arriving, they say goodbye to the driver. Jana, after unmasking the boss, has a discussion with him, and the man admits he did everything for a motorcycle. Hannah has a plan, and they go to a store where there is equipment that can help them reach the Himalayas, even though it costs them an arm and a leg. The boss, feeling guilty, gives the money he made with the tiger to pay for the trip. Balmani and his friend continue the journey with the tiger, climbing the mountains towards the first village on the way to the Himalayas. The friend tells him he earns his living by collecting honey from nests in the mountains. A very risky move, but that brings in a lot of money. When they reach the village, they introduce Balmani and the tiger to the locals, who are amazed at seeing the mini tiger. They arrived at Balmani's friend's house. They fed the tiger all muddy and made it look elegant. They said goodbye to the old friend and continued their way to the tiger's den. But the Shanghai thug was already looking for where the tiger's den was. Balmani and his companion, despite the altitude that made them dizzy and the fatigue that hit hard, continued. Balmani, stubborn as a mule, wanted to keep going even though his friend told him they needed to stop. Finally, they stopped to rest a bit, promising it would be only for a few hours. They got to a point where the friend gave him instructions to continue on his way because he had to go back to the village. They said goodbye and parted ways. Then we saw Hannah flying the sky above Everest. Balmani continued the journey with snow and terrain playing against them. Muti, with overflowing energy, kept bothering Balmani with games, and Balmani found it inappropriate, you understand. Finally, Hannah arrived at a landing strip where she met her guide. Balmani, lost and scared, found himself surrounded by mountains full of caves. A storm was coming and they needed to seek shelter. Balmani and him hid behind rocks, but the cold and hunger were starting to torment them. Balmani offered food to Muchi, but the tiger rejected it. The storm worsened, and Balmani passed out. Fools appeared in the middle of the storm and saved him. They were the locals. Balmani was severely affected by hypothermia, and they took care of him by giving him medicine and warm clothes. An old man from the Himalayan village watched Balman while he was recovering. After a few days, Balmani recovered and thanked the old man who took care of him. One night, Balmani took a look at the stars and the wonderful landscape of the Himalayas, remembering that his friend told him to follow the eagles to find the tiger's den. The old man gave him the final instructions to get to the tiger's den, and they said goodbye once more. Balmani and Muchi continued the journey alone, crossing the high mountains of the Himalayas. and a frozen, snowy forest. Suddenly, Multi became nervous and started to run, which made Balmani mad and scolded him. Mucky kept running, leaving Balmani alone and stunned. Balmani spent the night alone, starting a fire to keep from freezing. At sunrise, Balmani continued his way without direction until he found the tiger's den. Balmani got emotional and remembered his mother, spoke with her, and wondered if her spirit was there with him, and all of a sudden, Multi appears and Balman reprimands him, telling him that he couldn't have gotten there alone. He needed him. But the journey becomes dangerous when they run into the cursed Samsai, who arrives with a cage and threatens Balmani, but Balmani was not going to give up and much less let Samsai take Muchi. To everyone's surprise, Modus jumps on Samsai and manages to scare the hunter, who ends up falling off a cliff. Problem solved, end of the threat. At this point, Chana, who had done everything to join Balmani, finally arrives at her destination. She tells Balman the story of the hunter's pursuit, and he assures her that it's no longer a threat. Chana, seeing everything that Balmani has accomplished, apologizes for not believing his story about the tiger, and is surprised he went so far. She asks Balmani to let her accompany him on his journey, and he agrees. So, the journey continues, my friend. We then arrive at the temple where the monks perform their spiritual movements. The little Murky, this little tiger with more character than a habanero chili, sneaked in first, leaving everyone speechless. The uncle didn't care, and settled in the temple as if it was his job, making all the monks laugh with his nonchalance. Balmari freaked out and told Merc that he couldn't enter a temple like that, as if it was a taqueria, but the little tiger didn't care. Then, Balmari confronted Bouquet, the head monk. The old man asked them if they had arrived in a hot air balloon or what, and Balmari, all proud, says, "You realize, Chief, we've walked all the way here." Bouquet then tells him a story about a tiger legend his mother had told him and congratulates him for his courage. Balmari, more worried than a cat on a highway, asks Bouquet if Mulkri will be okay in this place. The monk tells him that he'll be safer than a politician on campaign, but tells him that the little tiger needs a mother. Balmari, not knowing where to find one, gets a sign from Bouquet that a local tigress might adopt him, and they commit to trying. In a blink of an eye, we see how they all head with the little tiger towards the tigress. Bouquet explains that in captivity, tigresses adopt any cub, but in real life there are no guarantees. They reach the tigress, who appears between the trees like a queen with her little ones behind her. The aunt's first approach is aggressive and Merc is scared, but Balmari tells him that he must stay, that this is his new home. Poor Murky, trembling like jelly, runs towards his new family, not knowing if he'll receive affection or a slap. Suddenly he turns to Balmari and hugs him as if saying goodbye. Then he goes with his new family, leaving Balmari crying with joy. Now, Murky has a family, and Balmari feels relieved. After this ordeal, the monk gives Balmari some advice. No matter how hard the past has been, one can always start over. And Balmari, smiling, shakes Jana's hand. Back at home, the cook sees a poster of a motorcycle and tears it up, as if to return to routine. Everything continues as normal. Balmari, now one of them, hangs up a poster of the legend of the tiger as a souvenir of her adventure, and as a reminder that everything can start again. But the adventure doesn't end here. I'll see you in the next one. Let's go.